Thank you for joining us for our Oxford Open Grand Round September 2025, where we are asking the question, what is next for AI in surgery? So just as a quick welcome and some housekeeping items here, this presentation is being recorded and will be shared with you via email after this event, so you'll be able to go back to it. We will, very much welcome your questions in the Q&A section of this webinar. So please do pop them in at any time in the Q&A function. We will try and answer them as we're going. We will also have time at the end to be able to answer your questions. So please do pop those in. And it's very wonderful to meet you. If I don't know you, my name is Olivia. I'm the Associate Course Director for the Masters in Surgical Science program and our PGCert program in Patient Safety and Quality Improvement. And I'm joined here by our panelists. So we'll go ahead and get started. Matt, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, welcome all. Matt Gardiner. I'm a consultant plastic surgeon based at Frimley Health and senior research fellow in Oxford, and also the associate medical director for research and innovation at Frimley, and have an interest in AI and innovation within the NHS. Over to you, Ryan.
We could almost get Matt to do exactly the same because I'm also a plastic surgery consultant, but up the road in Buckinghamshire, and I'm also the Associate Medical Director for Research and Innovation for my trust, and I lead the innovation work for the Royal College of Surgeons, the iHub, and also Editor-in-Chief for Bulletin Journal.
Oh, we have a special guest, Katrina Mason.
Hi everyone, so my name is Katrina Mason. I am currently a paediatric ENT consultant in London working at the Evelina Children's Hospital, which is part of Guy's and St Thomas's. I also have a digital innovation role in that I'm the Associate Medical Director at Euphonia, which is an AI health tech company delivering real-world AI solutions in NHS trusts around the UK. I've been an NHS clinical entrepreneur, and I am a graduate of the Oxford MSc Surgical Science and Practice programme. So excited to be back today.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So our question is, what's next for AI in surgery? And before we kick off, I think it's fair to say that AI in healthcare is mentioned on a daily basis in the news. And even this morning, driving in, I heard that the US and UK have agreed to invest heavily in AI within in the UK. I opened the BMJ on Monday, and again, there was an article about how AI is transforming radiology. So it is ubiquitous, it is exciting, but there's lots to discuss. To start with, we're going to move on, and Ryan is going to give us a little bit of an overview of what is AI and what are we actually talking about when we mention AI, before we go on and think about some of the applications that it's being used for.
Thanks, Matt. So the other thing to say is we have a set of slides, but actually we would much prefer this to be a conversation. So to reiterate what Olivia said at the beginning, if you do have questions as we go along, please put them in the Q&A box. We can see those, and we're very happy to have a bit of a mixture of slides and discussion. And the other thing that Matt left out was this morning also, the Royal College of Surgeons released their AI in Surgery podcast as part of their theatre podcast series. So there you go. It really is
excellent.
Super topical. So what is AI? The term gets bandied about a lot, and the reality is it covers a lot of different things. And you'll hear kind of LLMs and deep learning and machine learning and AI. So I'm sure that for the majority of people on the call, this is teaching you to suck eggs. But so if we take a step back, intelligence is just that ability to problem solve. So, or human intelligence, that ability to problem solve. So artificial intelligence is the ability for computers to solve problems in a way that humans would do. Machine learning is a subdivision of artificial intelligence, and it's where the computer gains the ability to solve problems, but isn't necessarily, these aren't hard-coded algorithms that it's just following a set path. It's learned through various techniques in order to identify ways to solve those problems and therefore have intelligence. And then deep learning is an even smaller field within the realm of machine learning, whereby you take the kind of the way the brain is structured and the way our brains kind of process things in a kind of ordered, structured way from one layer to the next to the next. And they took that concept and put it into the field of computing. So a program is able to kind of analyze, for example, a general picture to begin with, and in that picture there's a kind of two circles that the first layer is able to identify, and a triangle below it, and a kind of small moon shape below that. Then the next layer goes, I see you've got these shapes in this order. Well, if you've got the shapes in this order, this is probably a face. And then you've got, well, if they've got those shapes in that order and it's a face, and you've got pointy ears, and the next layer, this may well represent a cat. So it's kind of structuring your thing. And if you take that back into clinical practice, about the kind of being able to spot things like tumors on mammograms or CTs or whatever it is, it's the same process, that kind of layer by layer decision making in order to solve the problem that's put to you. So that's kind of broadly speaking. And then Gen AI, generative AI, is basically the kind of the front end that allows you to, in a very kind of naturalistic way, access that deep learning, that neural network that's sitting behind it. So I hope that makes sense. The kind of a super whistle stop tour into the different terms that get bandied about when it comes to AI.
And Ryan, this has not just appeared overnight, has it? It's AI and the application of it within healthcare has been around for quite some time, but it's accelerating at a rapid pace, as I think we've all found in our day-to-day life as well. But this has not happened just overnight. It's been bubbling away for a while.
Yeah. The decades and decades worth of work's kind of building slowly. I think really why we're all aware of it overnight, as you say, Matt, is probably that Gen AI bit, because prior to the ability for anybody to be able to access the neural networks through a kind of, I'm just going to type in, please create me a slide on what is AI, that this was all a kind of difficult or kind of computer sciences topic that was inaccessible. But when ChatGPT 3 was probably the first real kind of public facing generative AI version, suddenly opened up all of this possibility for anybody with a mobile phone or a web browser to have access to these incredible technologies. So that's probably the real reason why we're seeing it and think of it as an overnight thing. But you're absolutely right, Matt. This is decades of work
in the making. Okay. So just to reiterate what Ryan said earlier, and indeed Olivia, do put some questions in the chat. We're going to ask you also some questions, and we'd love to have your feedback. So I wonder if people could put some info about their current use of AI. Are you using it in your day-to-day practice? I'm an avid user of ChatGPT and other things. And we'd be really keen to hear about your current experience. So I think as we move on to the next slide, you'll be aware that there's all kinds of applications for AI at the moment. Typically, the technology has often helped to support surgeons' vision, but now it's really moving to the sphere of decision making and trying to reduce, for instance, cognitive load on surgeons, and it covers a really wide range of different tasks. And I don't know whether, Ryan, you want to just touch on some of these. I can certainly give our experience at Frimley, where it seems to be pervasive now, and also, which we'll come on to later, raising all kinds of ethical and professional queries as to how we deal with it.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to credit Umang Patel, Microsoft's CCIO in the UK, because I've stolen some of this slide from him. Really, what the important bit of this slide is, when we think about AI in clinical practice, a lot of people, the first thing they think of is the kind of the AI doctor, or for us, the kind of the involvement of AI directly into surgery and navigation or whatever it will be. And we'll talk about some of those shortly. But the reality is that is the thin end of the wedge in some ways of the use cases. That there's a whole load of other use cases in healthcare that will have or is having a huge effect. And there is a bit of a kind of disconnect between the risk profile and the kind of the readiness. So those kind of future gazing, the kind of patient facing AI is further down the line. There's a lot of risk. People are really worried about it and go, well, I don't want to worry about AI in healthcare. But the reality is there's all this other stuff we do that we're applying AI to, be it to support with teaching, to support with appraisals, just making emails quicker, or making notes in Teams meetings. None of that is high risk clinical, but actually if you can attack that and get people used to using AI in a healthcare setting, you can have a huge impact on the workload burnout. But also, if you can reduce that burden, you can increase the amount of clinical direct patient care that you can do in a much lower risk setting. So the point of this slide is to really show you that, yes, there is the really cool stuff coming down the line where Dr. AI is going to be super helpful. But let's not forget that when it comes to AI in healthcare, there's lots of things beforehand that have a much lower risk profile, but are ready to go and are being used already.
Yeah, I mean, Layla's just popped a message in the Q&A, a former student of the course, saying that she's running a pilot on AI and Scribe in ED. And I have to say, we're at Friendly Health, we've got Epic, a very big electronic health record, and looking forward to the ambient AI that apparently is available through the system and may be available shortly, to sit in the background, taking notes, creating a letter, even ordering tests based on the conversation that we're having with the patient. But even that in the NHS is behind what many people are doing in other areas of their practice. One may have heard of Heidi Health, for instance, and that's already very rapidly delivering support within the clinic setting. And I think particularly around use of electronic health records actually is a big burden. You know, people talk about the sort of the overall burden of feeding these this software with all the clicks and the information. And I see this as a great opportunity for reducing the burden on physicians and perhaps freeing up their time to do other things. I always feel that probably my time could be better spent doing something else rather than clicking. At Buckinghamshire, though, Ryan, I mean, your experience may be quite different. Do you have that? Or, you know, there's often a big disparity between the implementation of these technologies.
So we don't have Epic, which obviously so we have a much simpler health record, but we just kicked off a trial with another company as part of the NHS Clear program, and we've tried to go, okay, what's the problem you need to solve? Because that's always got to be number one. It can't just be that here's a shiny tool. So we went to our chief medical officer and said, which are the highest admin burden areas in the trust? And then we are applying we're accepted onto the NHS Clear program, and we are using 33N as another company to do an ambient AI in rheumatology in children and young adults, because these are huge admin heavy specialties. And the idea is to see, does this really have an impact? Because whilst these tools are really cool, we're not, unfortunately, in a system where really cool counts as a procurement sign-off. So you have to be able to show that you're delivering value through having these tools, and the hope is through these evaluations, that's where we're going to get to.
And as a research innovation leader at Bucks, do you feel that the research is keeping pace with the innovation? So I was interested to see an article in the BMJ a week from the president of the Royal College of Radiologists as she was stepping down, saying that actually AI probably was increasing the burden on radiologists and hadn't been delivering the benefits that perhaps had been touted. And much like robotics, the technology and the investment in that technology was very rapid and certainly outpaced the sort of scientific evidence to support implementation. But robotics, a bit like AI in its broader sense, is shiny and cool. And so that really does push people to try and adopt, even perhaps ahead of the evidence to support it.
Yeah, so it's always a bit of a kind of challenge. In what you don't want to do is slow all innovation down to the pace of kind of pure research, but you need to make sure that you're collecting the data. So again, with Bucks and our Clear program, we've done a lot of pre-work to understand what's the current admin burden, what's the current time frame for turning things around, what's the current face-to-face clinic time. So you have all that data ready to go. Then we've kicked off the trial with that data in mind, and we've now got 3 to 6 months to start to look at actually what's the impact, because the aim is to get to the end of the project with the ability to build a health economic case that either says, yes, this AI tool or this any tool is value adding, and in which case we need to present this to the procurement board, or actually, unfortunately, this isn't really making a dent. Katrina, from a euphonia point of view, and I know we'll cover euphonia much more, kind of how have you guys found that resistance to bringing in technology and having the kind of data, but then also the pilotitis when it comes to AI, and how do you guys navigate that from a commercial point of view?
Thanks, Ryan. So just to very quickly summarize the technology, we have an autonomous AI-driven clinical conversation agent. So essentially, we replace communication either with an administrator or a clinician. So we have a consultation over a telephone. So that's the core of the technology. And I think sort of one of those points, one of the really key learning points I had when I first started with the company about that value add, in that your innovation really has to add value into the institution or the environment that you're bringing it into. And my biggest learning points was that I chased this really sexy deployment of our technology, or what I thought was a really useful, sexy deployment of our technology into head and neck cancer triage. But the reality was we couldn't actually replace consultations. We couldn't free up clinicians at that stage. So we learned very quickly that even if you've got something that's sort of exciting or interesting, unless you're really going to save an institution money, you can't even pursue it. And if you're not going to save an institution money, you're not going to have a buying customer at the end of it. So what we've had to really learn early on is when we have our sort of, whether it's pitches or our early communications with trusts, clinicians, individuals, of trying to really understand whether our solution is going to have any real value to them, and therefore can we sustain it as a company? Is it going to be viable in order to, are we going to be able to sell this at the end of the day? Because otherwise we're going to be like any other startup and we'll just burn. So yeah, I've learned by personal experience.
It's a really interesting tension in that. How do you prove the value? And and in some ways it takes us. So Errol's asked a question about hi Errol, another student of the course. So thoughts and methods on validation and safety threshold assessment and completion for mass release public healthcare use of tools. And I think one of the interesting things when it comes to technology, not just in health but generally across the board, is we hold the threshold for introducing new technology higher than we do for the status quo, but B, kind of, if you are introducing a new AI service, we almost demand more of it than if we're introducing a new clinician into the team. And so I think there is a balance to be had, that patient safety is absolutely paramount. That is non-negotiable. However, we need to be realistic about what the tech is, what its potential is now, and what its potential is in the future if we treat it well and train it well and kind of slowly incorporate it more and more into our workflows. That there is that risk of kind of hyping the stuff that we have available now for what its future is going to be like. So, Matt, does that make sense in terms of that? I think there is this kind of over high bar we put in, saying, well, unless it's 100% perfect, we just don't want it at the moment, despite the fact that the system we work in is not 100% perfect.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's certainly an element to that, and you see that. I think from my simplistic point of view, if you look at electric cars and the adoption perhaps of autonomously driven vehicles, is that somehow an autonomous vehicle cannot cause death or serious harm to a pedestrian, that's just unacceptable. Yet everyday humans are doing the same to a far, far higher degree than an autonomous car is likely to. So I think you're right that the threshold perhaps is different. Um, there is a good website, and I'll try and get the link, looking at how digital innovation can be supported in terms of the research elements within the NHS. And I'll try and post that in a moment. And I think it does depend on the application and potential impact on patients. So again, the threshold, say, for implementing an AI-driven decision-making tool that is controlling a robotic surgery may be quite different to some element of administrative support that will help patients manage their appointments or attendance at the hospital and things like that. So these are, quite different to sort of implementations. We've got
And
another
the
question.
slide kind
Yeah,
of
sorry.
talks to
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
yeah, I was going to say the slide.
As the risk increases as you
Yeah,
go to more direct care, absolutely. I mean, my co-pilot use of trying to prioritize my emails, yeah, is one thing. But absolutely, sort of having high-level conversations with relatives, I think it would be a bit unfair if AI took over that at the moment, but that may come. And also, it's perhaps when we come on to the ethics and professional elements, the there are unintended consequences, I think, of implementing some of the technologies. So, if, for instance, you look at X-ray diagnostics, I believe there's sort of AI-supported tools for making diagnoses, but the systems were able to diagnose and provide details of the demographics of the patient just by looking at the chest X-ray, and you start to get biases built into the system. For instance, I think in the study, um, Black patients were underdiagnosed quite significantly, and that wasn't known at the outset, but became apparent as they went on through the study. Certainly at Primary Health, we have established an AI research committee, which won the NHS Parliamentary Awards 2024. It's one of the first. Get that plug in, and we've run some particularly imaging projects, and I think it is important that we do continue to develop really high quality data and research activity to support the implementation. I think there's definitely a danger of getting carried away with the shiny tool and just implementing it without fully understanding its impact. Okay, so Katrina, I wonder whether you could just dive in a bit more into perhaps as it was sort of come from the course through to your career with Euphonia. And I
Yeah.
mean, obviously AI is built into that. We have AI within the course that we run, the Healthcare Innovation Technology module. But it'd be really fascinating to see how you kind of use some of those transferable skills into your role.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I could say that Oxford MSc was very pivotal in my future career, my future life. And there was definitely a before the Oxford MSc and a subsequently post Oxford MSc, and I've just taken a very sort of diverse career path as a result. So yeah, I did the MSc in Surgical Science and Practice, which Matt and Ryan ran the innovation module. And the way I viewed it was this was an opportunity for me to acquire the skill sets that I wasn't necessarily going to acquire on the job through my sort of surgical training within my NHS trusts. And I wanted to essentially become a more well-rounded physician, surgeon, clinician overall. And I had no other sort of objective other than that. So I went in, I certainly didn't have a digital health sort of string to my bow at that point. And it really was the module that I did with you, Matt, that was just sort of mind blowing. It just opened my eyes to individuals who are revolutionizing healthcare. I think one of my favorite lectures was the gentleman who generated Organox, who has just done one of the biggest sales out of an Oxford Innovation Scheme very quickly. That was a gentleman who made a machine that essentially keeps organs alive outside of the body, primarily livers. And on that module, I also met the CEO of Euphonia, who's Nick de Pennington, who's an incredible individual. And I was just sort of on that master's and just thought, wow, that technology is really relevant to me in ENT and head and neck care. I was doing head and neck job at the time. So we obviously had master's assignment that I had to do. So I asked Matt, I was like, Matt, do you think I could message Nick and see if he'd like to collaborate on a project idea? And the rest is history, as it were. So I quickly pitched an idea to the CEO of this company, who, like most innovators, were like, yeah, brilliant, let's do it. Let's get a grant, go, go, go. And within a few months, rapidly, we had like 180 grand from the national grant funding to generate the idea, which was that head neck risk calculator, which I've told you the punchline hasn't gone live in clinical practice. So then I continued, went back into training. So I'd taken a year out to do that. COVID pandemic, went back to training. And since then, I've just grown with the company. I just did a bit of sort of ad hoc work here and there, then became a fellow, and then have sort of become associate medical director. And what's really nice now is it's primarily ophthalmology based company looking at ophthalmology consultations and communications, but we're now relighting the fire of ENT head and neck. And I am also using my sort of clinical acumen and clinical skill set to help provide wraparound to our technology, which of course it's a software as a medical device technology. But what I think we've realized is that there's limitations in just purely being software as a medical device. And in order to really add value to the trusts that we are in, we actually need to have an element of humans in the loop or human clinician care provided either side. So we've now actually got CQC validation registration, and that's also the element that I'm helping lead. Because I think actually at this stage in innovation, we do need to acknowledge there are some limitations in AI technology, that you can't do everything. You can't truly sort of provide the whole service, and that's what we're now trying to do. So we do actually have some clinicians on board that wrap around either side of the product.
Can I pick up on that, Katrina? That one of the kind of key principles of the course is not to kind of create the next wave of clinical entrepreneurs that are going to go off and start up companies, which if you do, then fantastic. But actually, I think Katrina has hit on something that's absolutely key, be it for AI or robotics or any other technology, that actually what is required, so the technology is great, but unless you have a workforce that understands the technologies, exactly having the conversations that we're having around on the webinar around risk and implementation and all the other bit and value add, you need that workforce that gets it, that can be the internal clinical innovators that can help bring this technology to the front line, because good technology on its own will not reach the front line without that ability to understand both sides of the equation, the clinical and the commercial. Should we go to the next slide? Because I think that we're just creeping on towards the different areas of surgery, and Katrina's absolutely kind of touched on beautifully the where AI is being used in the kind of post-op. And big plug for Bucks. We were the very first hospital in the world to use Euphonia. But the reality is a bit like when we mentioned AI in healthcare, the first thing you think of is the kind of the super cool stuff at the patient facing. In a similar way, when you talk about AI in surgery, a lot of time people think about the operative period, but the reality is that's one part of the journey. Matt or Katrina, did you want to kind of talk about the kind of pre-op part? Or?
Yeah, I can talk a bit about sort of my experience. So with Euphonia, the technology that we have is called Dora. So she has a conversation with patients, and what we're trying to do is replace consultations throughout that surgical journey or that patient pathway, particularly in cataract surgery. So what's really nice is that an AI system can obviously have a preoperative assessment conversation with a patient, so that can free up a nurse-led appointment, that can highlight patients who are perhaps not suitable to certain operative environments. Particularly in cataract surgery, a lot of work is getting done in the independent sector, but they can't actually safely look after quite complex individuals. And then you can wrap that around at the end by having a post-operative follow-up consultation, again, just an AI-generated telephone consultation. I think what's nice with, if you're sort of collaborating with institutions and researchers and surgeons themselves, you can add in extra things. So do you want to do some PROMS measures? Do you want to get a bit more data as to whether the surgery was successful? That's easily sort of pigeonholed into those series of conversations that can be had. That's a sort of
So it's fascinating. So one of Tom Revington, who's one of our panelists as well, director for the course, has put a message to us saying that he feels the victim of AI, and often everything is now moving towards the first point of contact will not be with the human, but will be with some kind of chatbot or other technology that isn't necessarily human orientated. And I think with euphonia, do people get the choice of speaking to a human, or is it's first of all Dora, and if that doesn't go well, then potentially on. And I think there is that danger that suddenly humans are held in reserve somewhere down the line, and that there's a break basically between the person interaction.
So just to speak to that point, Matt, just to give some technical details, it depends on how it's been commissioned by the trust or the region. But generally, if you're not suitable for an AI telephone conversation, you just have your standard pathway. So there's no sort of change. You just do your usual come in face-to-face appointment. But generally, most people we at least attempt a phone call with, and then if it's not suitable or incompleted, we can pass that back to the trust according to appropriate SOPs. I think just coming back to Tom's point, I think at this stage in the sort of technology, I think it's about augmenting what we can do as opposed to truly replacing us. But I very much have a sort of quite philosophical approach about this. I think we really need to be aware of our limitations as humans. I have good days and bad days. I can't speak to everyone in every language. I go to sleep at night. And I've got an IQ that's at a certain level. I can't exceed that. And I think if you look at, it's so high. If you look at ChatGPT 5 now, I think 3 have the IQ of Einstein. We cannot compete with that. We can't. And I don't think we should. And I think there's going to be a point where not only is it better from a intelligence, understanding perspective, but actually from the subtle nuances of human communication, in order, empathetic communication, I think it's just going to be better than us. So I think we're right to question, challenge, safely adopt. But I think 5 years, 10 years from now, we're going to be in a completely different world. And I welcome that.
Sorry, I was just very quickly just add that we will pass the inflection point where at the moment, if you use AI, there's a kind of clinical liability risk. We will hit that inflection point where if you don't use AI, there'll be a clinical implication risk.
One sort of simple practical application that we've been using is to generate patient information. So kind of talking to your point there, Katrina, where you're in a busy surgical clinic, and actually I've used ChatGPT to generate really good, high quality patient information. You can sort out your prompt, and with the prompt, you can get it at exactly the right language level that you want. You could put in patient comorbidities, and it will try and adjust the information. But even having done all of that, it doesn't really meet the sort of the top level of patient information generation that's accepted. So people may be familiar with the Patient Information Forum that provides guidance on how to generate good patient information, because patients haven't fed back on that information. And so to make it really top notch, actually you need to go through this process of engaging patients, getting feedback and everything else. And it's, how do you call that? Because actually, is it better to give more people better quality information, but it might not be absolutely perfect, or slow down the process and sort of get it badged, but take forever generating it, and it's sort of then out of date. So I think that's partly going back to the tensions around getting on with it versus proper evaluation and correct implementation, which will delay things, I think, and that perhaps will deny people whether it's patient information or better care, for instance.
And Matt, do you think there is, because a bit like it's really easy to be a bad doctor and it's really difficult to be a really good doctor, and it's really easy to put a prompt into Gen AI to create a patient leaflet. But actually, if you spend time and you really understand the kind of nuances of prompt engineering, which is why there are now jobs which are the job title is kind of chief prompt engineer, that you can get, even with where we are at the moment, you can get to really high quality output, but you've got to understand how to use it. And to, I think the point Katrina made earlier, that 5-10 years down the line. So if we think about med students that have started med school now will qualify in 2030, and they'll be consultants in 2040. This technology is only going to get bigger and bigger, and so we need to make sure that we are training our next generations to understand the technology and the nuances, to make sure they do produce the good patient information leaflets. I realize that's not a big thingy to jump over, but do you know what I mean? Yeah, it's hard to do it well, and we need to be training people to do it well.
Yes, I know. I completely agree with that. Yeah, Katrina.
Yeah, I thought you were just volunteering yourself to write the next surgical curriculum for Oxford now as a AI arm. But we have to think this way. Like, we can't resist this. It is coming. It's here already. It's terrifyingly quick how quickly it's iterated and developed. I haven't seen anything like this in my lifetime. It's only going to get smarter and clever, and yeah, I think an understanding of that. Matt, to your point that you were talking about generating sort of patient information leaflets like on the cuff using ChatGPT, with the new GPT-5 that came out, Sam Altman has very actively sort of lauded the health benefits of his app. And even though it's not a medical device, it's not intended for healthcare use, so outside of regulatory approvals, they're actually very clearly advertising this and marketing it as almost like an adjunct for the patient. So it's like the champion of the patient. It's allowing patients to digest information. What questions should I be asking? How can I interpret these results? So it is actually really interestingly being proposed for and used for a healthcare setting. So,
well, I think that's fascinating, and that's where increasingly medical sort of professional control of information has been lost. I mean, of course, there's lots of advice available on the web. People have always gone to it over the last 10, 15 years to seek advice. But I'll give you one recent example. I'm a researcher, and we had a trial comparing which pair of flexor tendons in the finger, either one tendon or both tendons. And I was trying to recruit a patient to the study, and she read my patient information leaflet, said, oh, it's an excellent trial. But I've asked ChatGPT, and it says that I should have both tendons repaired, and therefore I'm out. And that took me aback. Patients have always sought advice from maybe their relative, or perhaps they have done some searching online. But I think ChatGPT and others are held at a much higher level, that somehow they're superhuman, and they're not. It is superhuman in its knowledge, and it is a source of truth. And so I have concerns around that, and that's where trusted resources and perhaps some curation of this is really important. I'll give you another example. So we're doing patient information using ChatGPT, but for some reason it always misses out complex regional pain syndrome whenever I ask it to deliver the risk of hand surgery, which is uncommon, but nonetheless something that really does need to be in a consent form. So I do think sometimes it's not quite there, and that's where I think some curation of it at the moment is important. Okay, should we move on? We've got a couple of questions coming through. Perhaps if we go on to the next slide. Hugh Simmons, hi Hugh, thanks for your message. On the use of AI for robotic surgery, do you have any thoughts on whether particular types of more repeatable surgeries might be suitable for first application of this technology, and what some of the barriers to adoption might be? It's a very good question. My feeling with robotics is that it's sort of augmenting the experience of a human surgeon doing the robotic surgery. It, for instance, is perhaps improving the movements. It's perhaps giving some augmented view of the field of surgery, perhaps even identifying tumor margins and things like that. In terms of repeatable surgeries, I think the sort of scientific evidence for the application of robotics within surgery is still catching up and has got quite some way to go to really clearly demonstrate the benefits of robotics. So time will tell whether that's the case.
I think
Regulatory, yeah.
I'm just going to add very quickly onto that. So if you look at the work of Johns Hopkins with their automated robotic surgery, so they've got their robot to be able to do suturing, and recently they did a cholecystectomy on a pig using Gen AI prompting. So there are bits that are coming. I think there's a couple of bits of technology that still have to happen for anything to really even approach that, and computer vision is absolutely key, and especially moving targets. So a lot of the really cool navigation stuff that you see, where you have a CT kind of anchored onto the patient, and you wear your headset, and as you move through the patient, you can see. At the moment, you need physical anchors to lock that image in place. And so, to your question about what are the potential areas, well, when you've got areas that have got predominantly bone, so you can see there could be a role in the not that distant future where everything's locked in place, the CT's in place, and you can align a prosthesis. Apologies if there's any orthopedic surgeons in the audience, but that's only where I could see that role for accuracy and standardization. But I think the reality is, as Matt said, I think we're still a fair way off that, and there's quite a few steps that have to happen, and quite a few more practical things that will happen first before we're really into the point where we're looking at autonomous robotic surgery.
This is leading to all kinds of new words and terminologies. I came across Gaussian splatting. Have you come across that? That's an interesting technology that's improving the quality of the sort of 3D rendering, I think, of these sort of overlays. Okay, so I think we've covered off a bit of this. Automating documentation, we've talked a bit about the use of ambient AI, preoperatively saying your consultations. One thing perhaps we could just touch on is surgeon well-being and whether we think that AI has a role there. Brian, as editor of the Bulletin, and I know that you've run a series of articles around sort of the psychological elements of surgery and supporting surgeon well-being. I've heard of reports of people using ChatGPT, for instance, to sort of counsel them and help support their use it. I've not tried that. I've had a few conversations. My son's had a few interesting conversations with ChatGPT. I think I might have to stop that. But I wonder whether you could talk to that a little bit.
So I think there's probably a few bits of this. So a bit like everything in AI, the data in kind of the quality of the data in is what derives the data out. And I've been using it pretty solidly every single day for the last however many years it is now. Is it coming up to 3 years since GPT-3 came out? So again, if you craft your prompts well enough, and I'm not saying I'm a kind of expert prompt engineer, but I kind of saw something somebody had posted about a particular prompt that really dug deep. Let's go with dug deep. Because it has all the data I've put into it. So it was like kind of everything you know about me. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? But literally it says, but don't stay at the superficial. Kind of go down and look at each of those domains and identify ways it could be. And the output was slightly intimidating. But you can imagine that in surgery, because we have this whole thing about video logbooks are a thing, and whether we should be doing that to really prove the quality of training, so moving away from indicative numbers. But the reality is, the three of us as trainers, we're not going to sit and watch 3 hours per operation times 10x for a single trainee. But you could put all of that into an AI model and say, critique this video and find the areas that this particular trainee does well, find the areas that they need to work on, and suggest some exercises or suggest some things that may help with those particular areas. So I think there's a huge set of potential we haven't even uncovered in terms of where that will go, but kind of taking a step back in terms of well-being. So yeah, you have the kind of AI counsellor, which is fine and slightly gimmicky, but is interesting. But there is just that kind of taking the workload off of us, of the kind of repetitive, monotonous tasks that bring us down, increase that risk of burnout and reduce staff retention. If you can take some of that stuff, actually, there's a huge amount of kind of morale-based bonuses that you can gain.
Yeah, which is perhaps not available day to day just because of the resource implications for the hospital, training deanery, etc. Okay, shall we move on then? I realise actually time is flying by. We've been nattering away. We've got a few other things just to talk about, thinking about the future, actually. We've talked a lot about the sort of current implementation, but we probably ought to move on to the future and also perhaps some of the ethical and professional issues that people have raised in the questions as well. If Olivia could move us on. So one of the questions around robotics was, what are the quick wins, or where is AI going to support us at the moment, and perhaps what are the adoptions for future? We've touched upon briefly sort of the imperfect data, and I think, Ryan, this was your slide in terms of garbage in, garbage out. That's an issue. And we've talked a bit about the biases that might become inherent in some of these systems. I wonder whether it's just worth covering that off in a bit more detail.
Yeah. So I think a couple of things to this slide. If anybody, certainly those on the course, would have heard this, and if anyone's heard me talk about AI elsewhere, the cake there is the analogy of what we see or what we think about in terms of AI in healthcare is a bit like the most beautiful cake with wonderful icing, and that icing represents the AI that it just looks so good. But as soon as you cut into the cake, the whole thing collapses because the sponge is undercooked and underprepared. And in some ways, that's where we are with NHS and healthcare data, that our data isn't yet strong enough to really get the benefits out of AI. And that has implications. It means that what the kind of insights we're asking it to deliver are on imperfect data. And the problem with AI, and certainly Gen AI, is it's a bit like Hermione Granger. So it is the perfect teacher's pet. If you ask it a question, it will answer that question, whether it understand or no, whether it has the data to back up its answer, but it's programmed to go, you've asked me a question, I must answer it. And it doesn't, there's no way yet of understanding where those hallucinations are and how kind of subtle. And I know, Matt, you give some great examples of hallucinations, but it wants to help. It wants to give you an answer. And in doing so, it amplifies bad data. It fills in gaps in incomplete data. And one of the issues we've got to be really careful of in the future is, as it trains on new data, a huge proportion of that data is AI generated data. So there is a risk that we start to get these kind of loops, that a term nobody's using yet. I'm coining this. So if you hear it in the future, you heard it here first, of echo chambers, as in AI echo chambers, where the thing is just building up on its own bad outputs.
Yeah, I think we've all had the experience of asking ChatGPT something. It gives you a completely wrong answer, and you point that out to it. It goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, you're absolutely right. Yes, it's that, isn't it? Like, not fast, not by the skin off a duck's back, water off a duck's back. Carry on." And you just wonder how many things you are wrong that you don't pick up. Okay, Arif asks in the questions, do you think it will evolve primarily as a decision support system that might enhance surgeons' intuition skills, or do we think it may take over a significant part of interruptive decision making independently? Well, I think there's only one direction it's going, to be honest, and that is the latter. For instance, it might be that you're doing robotic surgery and it will determine whether or not you've completely resected a tumor, because it will be supporting your vision and understanding of where the tumor is. And ultimately, it will come down to that technology to make that decision, rather than the surgeon deciding whether or not to remove a bit more tissue or not. So I think, that's going to happen. I'm almost certain of that.
There's already some great work by Professor Carhill in Ireland, who, because he thinks it's just data. Can't stress that enough. This is all just data. So he's looked at bowel resections, kind of loads and loads of videos, and looked at where bowel resections have been made relative to a tumor, and for future anastomosis, done by expert surgeons or senior surgeons and more junior surgeons. And then he shows this amazing heat map of where those incisions are made, which can then be overlaid on the image. So when you've now got your new patient in front of you, it's using all that data to heat map where an expert surgeon or senior surgeon would do it and where a more junior surgeon would do it. And all of that is building that future. Well, where's that going? Yes, it's giving a bit of kind of navigation to the surgeon now, but in 5-10 years, is that still the point of just giving navigational input? And this technology is just going to grow and grow. And unless, as clinicians, we are there and understand it and can help shape it, this is coming regardless of whether we're there or not. And we need to make sure we do our bit to kind of guide its real world implementation. So going back to that importance of the clinical innovator.
Yeah. And I think Errol makes a good point here that we've talked a bit about robotic surgery and the benefits there, but actually open surgery may well benefit from this as well. I know you've got a fancy pair of Meta Ray-Bans, Ryan. Katrina, have you joined the cool club? I'm not there yet.
Need to be paid for
it. But I think absolutely you could envisage wearing some sort of glasses or headset. You might be able to have, along the lines of Proximy, some sort of proctoring, or someone be able to dial in and provide support whilst you're operating. You could effectively phone a friend or phone an AI assistant to get some advice on what you might have to do next in terms of surgical technique or decision making. So I think that sort of technological support is kind of here, but not obviously widely adopted. But the technology is all there, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, and it is those kind of risk barriers that are kind of holding it back, rightly so, from healthcare, but those will be crossed in time. Graham asked whether overconfidence in AI could make us less skilled in identifying hallucinations. I think it's a really good question. There's a paper, is it from Stanford, that have looked at people that use Gen AI more regularly are becoming stupid or less intelligent. So I think there is an element of that. I think the other side of that question, so we've been using skin analytics for AI detection of skin cancers in our trust, and it's had a fantastic impact. One of the pushbacks is, it's going to de-skill the dermatologists and plastic surgeons in using dermoscopy. Well, possibly, but that's because dermoscopy is in time going to become an outdated skill. So you don't need to use it because you'll have the tools, as long as the tools, we have enough confidence in them, in the same way that we don't stick our finger into urine to taste whether it's still sweet. And that's a skill that luckily we're all de-skilled in, and we don't need it anymore because tools moved on. And I think in many ways this is similar.
It is important though. For instance, in robotics, I believe with robotic assisted radical prostatectomy, for instance, the surgeons are less exposed to doing it open, or if they have a major complication, converting from a robotic assisted procedure to a open procedure may be more challenging. And actually, the trainees coming through that program now may be less familiar. I suppose the same could be said for laparoscopic surgery and having to open an abdomen, but perhaps to a slightly lesser degree. So I think they're legitimate concerns, aren't they, around the loss of human skill set because these technologies are taking over. But I'm sure this is repeated throughout history in terms of technologies coming, supplanting what was done previously, and actually freeing up humans to do other things or contributing in different ways that we don't currently have the time to do. So time's marching on. We're actually only 5 minutes away. And I wonder whether we just finish. We've had a good number of questions. Please do put any final questions in the chat or the Q&A box rather. Perhaps we just finish on thinking about some of the ethical and professional issues. We have covered off some of them. One thing I wanted to just touch on was patients in all of this, of course. We've talked about patients, but I'm not sure what my patients think about this technology. I don't know what they think about me using ChatGPT to develop some of the patient information, for instance. Um, Katrina, Ryan, do you have experience with this? Have you had pushback, particularly Katrina with euphonia? Is this a technology that discriminates against those that are not tech savvy or um, are less engaged in this sort of
Um,
advanced?
so patient public engagement has been like very much at the core of our technology co-creation. Um, but I think what's really nice is that even though it's like an AI solution, the actual interface is speech communication. So generally, it's fairly accessible for most people. But we have done a lot of work on certain subsections of society into whether this technology is acceptable and usable by them. So non-English first language speakers, we've got an NAHR trial on that at the moment in Moorfields. We've listened to cancer patients, we've listened to people with learning disabilities. So we have actively sort of sought out perhaps patients where you'd naturally think that AI doesn't naturally sort of fit with them. But I think it is a really important thing, as you say. I think any technology that goes into a patient's hands has to have PPI involvement from the outset. And what's quite nice is with a lot of regulatory processes now for software as medical device, that's almost like integrally built into that process, particularly in FDA in America and more so in the UK and EU. So yeah, welcome it, advocate for it, has to be done.
And I think the fact that Gen AI is so ubiquitous in so much of the kind of life. I now use it to create bedtime stories for my kids. Like it's just across the board. So the idea of someone coming in and you say, "Oh, well, we're using generative AI for whatever." Oh yeah, well, of course you are. I used it to work out what to cook based on what was in my fridge the other day. So that makes perfect sense.
Well, I've not got to that point of getting Gen A's great stories yet. I'm still proper parenting, right?
I'm
Um,
augmented. I'm an augmented parent,
As parents.
Matt.
Okay, so as we come to a close, I mean, finally, surgeons must remain in control. Well, do, do you think we can? I mean, is it already slipping from our fingers? Are we going to ultimately be subservient? Are we going to be just peripheral to all of this, or do you think we can maintain control?
So I would argue that we shouldn't be in control if there's something that's better than us. And we may not be there yet, but I think we will be there. And I mean, surgeons are the most egotistical, arrogant subsection of healthcare. And I think we need to be the first to sort of lead by example, because if there's something better than us, we can't advocate against it. We have to utilize that. Yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts, Ryan?
Katrina, I can recommend a good counsellor for you if you require. um, so I would agree disagreeably and say that I think that we will stay in control, at least for our careers and hopefully the next set. But the role of the surgeon and the doctor in general will change. And my argument is that I don't think AI is going to replace us, but those that can use it and do use it effectively and understand it will replace those that don't use it.
Yeah. And overall, our feeling is that it will drive improvements in patient care and ultimately benefit the human race in terms of access to surgery. Now, don't forget that you know, billions of people don't have access to high quality surgery. So, whilst I think probably our discussions are focused on high income countries, our experience in the UK, for instance, actually there's huge potential to improve the quality of surgery and access to surgery across the globe. So, perhaps at that point, we will draw to a close.
Wonderful. And I'm now rethinking all of my credentials. So thank you for a little bit of the shock there. But It was really, really wonderful to see everyone today, and I recognize that we could spend, my goodness, just weeks and weeks on this. Lucky for you, this is just sort of a quick teaser of some of the information that is available in our courses. So I mentioned Matt and Ryan teach on our Healthcare Innovation and Technology module, which you can find in any of these areas, the Masters in Surgical Science and Practice, the PGCert in Patient Safety and Quality Improvement, or any of the Surgical Science and Practice short courses if you wanted to just take this one as a standalone module. If you want to stay in touch for any of these key updates and hear about some of these courses that are coming up, or if you're interested in joining us for future Oxford Open Grand Rounds, please do, sign up to our mailing list. You can find us here on the QR code. You can find us via email. You can search for us on Google, wherever you get your information about Oxford. We will be there. And with that, thank you so much for joining us today.